Got it. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, and welcome inside another exciting edition of our Little Yankees podcast. So long, but we are back, folks. I am Julian Coltree, joined alongside, as always, my boys, my friends, my compadres, Josh Levin.
What up, what up?
And Eric Ray Sepulveda. E-Ray, what up, bud?
What's up, guys? It's been a while. It's great seeing
you. I know. That's what I was going to say. This is the first podcast that we have been able to do in probably about like three and a half weeks. And obviously it was for a good reason. I'm moving a little bit. I'm down in DC now, and I was on a vacation to Alaska. And for a lot of that 3 weeks, or at least maybe the first portion of that 3 weeks, we honestly thought that the New York Yankees might never lose again. And now we honestly think that they might never win again because they've been that bad. So really, it's been like a complete 180 from when we stopped recording the podcast and took this 3-week hiatus to what they've been now.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like when we took our little break, they stepped into a time machine and went back to April and May and June. And yeah, man, I mean, it's ugly. It's ugly, I don't know how else to put it other than that. It's just bad.
You know what's ironic? It's almost like we are kind of destined on this podcast to never talk about the Yankees being good, because we were given maybe one episode where I think the win streak was maybe about like 6 or 7 games. They obviously had been able to put a little bit together, but we weren't in the thick of it. We didn't get to really get into the juiciness of the 13-game win streak with the comebacks and the big offensive outputs and being able to dominate the first part of that West Coast swing. And now that we are back, the Yankees are playing legitimately terribly. They just lost 2 out of 3 of the Mets. They got swept by the Toronto Blue Jays in that series in which they didn't lead the entire time for the first time in 90 plus years. They got lose 2 out of 3 to the Baltimore Orioles, and it was just terrible. So it really is almost as if the 2021 season and this New York Yankees podcast, our Little Yankees podcast, is destined to never be able to talk about the Yankees being good, because we have really yet to on the now almost 3/4 or more than 3/4 of the season that we've done this.
We were bamboozled. We were fooled. We were blue balled. That's literally what we were. I mean, when the Yankees, the last time they made it to 13 wins in a row, and losing 2 out of 3 in Oakland, that's fine, whatever. And then losing 2 out of 3 in
they won.
They split.
It was a
split.
split.
Oh, they split. You're right. It was a 4-game series. They lost 2 out of 3 to the Angels, which is, in its own regard, it's bad because the Angels are whatever, but it's still the West Coast. You know what I mean? But when they lost 2 out of 3 to the Orioles, like you said, Jules, that's when I felt like we were starting to get hot. Like, because that's just, you can't do that.
And not in a good way.
Yeah. Since our last podcast, the Yankees are 8-12. And they blew a 10.5-game lead in 16 days to the Toronto Blue Jays, who, I mean, are scorching right now. They look like, I think Josh mentioned it in chat the other day, they look like the team to beat right now. They're just hitting on all cylinders. They're like,
Josh gave a crazy prediction. He said he thinks they're going to win the pennant.
I don't want to give it yet. Maybe he'll do
it.
I just revealed it. So
that's fine.
Yeah, true. But yeah, man, it's really fucking bad, actually. And granted, they won Saturday. Aaron Judge with the 2 home runs ties the game. Then Sunday, the whole ordeal there. And then yesterday they came back, which, if they lost against the Minnesota Twins, a team that you have been killing for the last 2 decades, and then the Twins also came in at 130 last night, and the Yankees just bed in the water yesterday. And Aaron Judge, the guy again, brought us back. Aaron Judge in himself, you got to give him credit. He's trying to save this season for us, and he's been healthy all year. And yeah, man, I mean, another big, literally every game, I think they have 18 games left. Every game is big. I mean, the wild card race is as tight as hell. I mean, you got Oakland and Seattle right behind us. And then you got we're the second right now by a percentage point, and then the Toronto Blue Jays hold the 1 seed. But yeah, man, it's gonna be a tense, crazy next 3 weeks of this wild card race, and I don't want to be fooled right now. I still think they have to show us something in the next 9 games against bad teams, but I don't want to fall for it again because I still think they're pieces of shit and mediocre.
So the best way to put it is that the good news is that the Yankees control their own destiny because, of course, they play their final 3 series against Boston and Toronto and Tampa Bay. And the bad news is that the 2021 Yankees are the Yankees that control their own destiny, and they've been absolutely garbage this year, and they have not been good at any point. So if I told you guys that they would go, I don't know, in that 9-game stretch, 2-7, you probably would say, absolutely, I 100% believe that because the pieces of shit, as E-Ray just said. So it's
Jules, if they go 2-7, if they go 2-7 in the next 9 games, I don't need against these.
Well, it wouldn't be the next 9, not against Baltimore or Texas or Cleveland, who are obviously they're against. But I mean, again, at the end of the season, that big crucial stretch, because at the end of the day, they control their own destiny with those games. Even if they were 500 and went into that series where they are now, which is a game back of Toronto, a game back of Boston, they would have an opportunity to put themselves in not only a playoff spot, but in the top spot in the wild card, which at this point is what they're getting. The division's toast. It's been toast for weeks, really, since they didn't gain any ground against Tampa with the 13-game win streak. But now the Yankees have to do it. And that's really where we can start here, because the fact is, despite everything, despite the fact that we have seen this team invest in the trade deadline to try and get good players, despite the fact that we have, hammered and hawed and moaned and bitched about their inability to do things right, we are now mid-September with 18 games left, and the New York Yankees are still making boneheaded moves with their lineups. They're still resting players. They're prioritizing putting bad lineups out there in order to save a guy. And frankly, the thing is, that can't happen anymore. And it was the biggest issue over the last few weeks and why they stunk so bad. And now it looks as though it's probably going to continue as they get towards the end of the season, which is not encouraging news if you want the Yankees to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think, over that 13-game streak, and really even before the streak began, like when they started playing better, around the All-Star break, before and after, they were doing things differently. They were stealing bases. We talked all about that stuff in the previous weeks and months, but something happened towards the end of that streak. And even, after it ended, which was that they kind of stopped doing all those things differently. And I'm not just talking about stolen bases. During that time, they were playing their best players. Luke Voit was in the lineup every day, winning AL Player of the Week. There was a sense of urgency that hadn't been there in previous months. And it's almost like when the streak ended, they just kind of reverted back to the same philosophies that they had before, because at least in my opinion, it feels like they used that 13-game streak as a way to really get themselves not just back in the race, but into a playoff spot. And once they were in the first place on the wild card with what was it, a 3.5-game lead, with games in hand over Boston, who was behind them. Like, it almost is at that moment they took their foot off the gas and said, okay, we're good. We're where we need to be in the standings. Now we can start to do those things again, which is, resting guys, trying to steal an extra day off for certain guys, or, just doing all the things that, drives you nuts as a fan. And so that's what happened. They stopped stealing bases. Guys stopped getting in the lineup. The defense became sloppy again. The relief pitching has been a massive issue. And all of a sudden, what do you have, where they are right now, which is, tied for the second wild card spot by percentage points, maybe a little bit ahead of Boston, but not by any means are they a lock to make the playoffs. And 3 weeks ago, whatever it was, maybe less, 2.5 weeks ago, I think the three of us all thought for sure they were making it. I mean, I was talking to people in my life as if it was a guarantee that October was coming, just because I think the playoff probability, they were at like 97% or something like that.
97.
And then it was the Orioles series came The Angels and then the Orioles series came right after that. And ever since then, it's just been, it's just been a spiral. And I said this to you guys last week. It's like when they start playing badly and they get into a funk, they fall deep into a hole before they crawl out of it. And yeah, I mean, the 7-game losing streak ended, but it's win one, lose one, win one, lose one. They still haven't gotten out of the hole that they climbed into for 2 weeks against poor competition aside from Toronto. So we're still waiting for them to like really turn the corner from the losing streak and from, the bad stretch of games. And they're running out of time. And, you hear some of the quotes and it's just like, they still think that they have time. They don't. Like, they have to go on starting tonight. I think they have to basically, in my opinion, they have to sweep the rest of the week. They have to sweep Baltimore and they have to sweep Cleveland, and they have to sweep Texas next week before they play Toronto again. Because I just don't think, and then they play Boston as well. So because I just don't think that they have any margin for error. And that's the only way that me or you or anybody else is going to say to ourselves, okay, they're going to make the playoffs now. We have to see them actually like pummel bad teams. They have to play up. They have to play up. They have to pretend that these teams are good because they play down to their competition when the team is bad, and they play up when the team is good. That's except for the Toronto series last week. But, so like it has to start tonight with Garrett Cole on the mound. Now's the time.
And what's most important is the fact that they have to stop pussyfooting around when it comes to putting out lineups, because the fact is they can no longer afford that because of how bad their bullpen is. They cannot go into games where they're up 1, 2, 3 runs late in the contest, because since we last recorded the pod, Jonathan Eliza obviously got hurt. Zach Britton was confirmed that he's been done for the year. Chapman has not been good. We know that. He hasn't been good most of the year since that beginning stretch. So you're looking at the fact where, as much as we've complained about it, they are regularly throwing Andrew Heaney out there in high leverage innings, despite the fact that he is the worst pitcher that I have ever seen. And he's not a reliever. He's a starter.
And he pitched 2 days in a row.
Yep. He pitched 2 days in a row. And this is a guy who is now being asked to shut down opposing teams. In that series against the Mets, he came in with the bases loaded and 1 out. This is a guy who's a fly ball pitcher, and in other games has been responsible for blowing it. And yet Aaron Boone or the analytics staff or Brian Cashman, whoever it might be, they're saying he needs to go out there and pitch. So the only way that the Yankees can win and do what Josh mentioned, which is go on a really long, beefy win streak where they can keep themselves in the race and maybe gain a couple of games on Boston, Toronto if they fall flat on their face, is to put Luke Voigt out there, is to put Stanton out there, is to put Judge out there, make sure Rizzo and Gallo are out there, and make sure these guys play every single day. There's the ability to afford days off does not exist anymore. And we know it probably will, because that's what they've done all year, and that's what's so frustrating. And I remember hearing Luis Rojas, who obviously is not the Yankees manager, he's the Mets manager, but he said on Carton and Roberts last week that, we use analytics and we look at the way that these guys have played, and, we have to give them a day off. But the fact is, no, you can't do that anymore, because the only way the Yankees are going to keep themselves from falling out of it is if they use their lineup to the advantage. Because outside of Garrett Cole, their starters have started to fall flat on their face. Luis Heel stunk yesterday. The rest of their rotation has not really been that good, and their bullpen's been a disaster for
Tyone's
part of a
hurt.
month.
We have to mention that as well. Tyone's hurt now, so
Yep.
Yeah. I mean,
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, you guys pointed out, man, if they don't hit and score runs in this next stretch of games, the season's over. It really comes down to that, because I don't trust no one. No Yankee fan trusts anyone in this bullpen right now. The only guy we might trust is who?
Clay Holmes,
who has been brilliant, by the way. Shout out Cashman. That was a great trade. I think in 16 innings, he has a 2.16 ERA, 32% strikeout rate. He's been phenomenal. And maybe Wandy, I guess, here and there. He's struggled a little bit for a couple weeks, but he's still that's the thing though. Like Chad Green, I mean, you put him in a game, in a tie game, you better bet the over. He's going to give up the time run or a game-winning home run. And you mentioned it, Joel Chapman. I mean, he's streaky, just like the Yankees. It's just like if they don't score runs, if they don't blow teams, I almost said blow teams up. Jesus Christ, blow teams open. Relax here. Blow teams open. Like it's gonna be bad because this bullpen will give it up.
Well,
I mean, outside of Chapman and Clay Holmes and Wandy Peralta, the rest of their bullpen is made up of pitchers who are super bad. Like, they sent down Krisky today, or they DFA'd him, or whatever it was, and he's just one of a handful of terrible pitchers who still exist within this bullpen. It's like 3/4 of the bullpen are terrible pitchers.
I mean, there's a lot to say, because the issue with Loaisiga getting hurt, and let's just put Britton to the side because it's been a lost season for him. He's been a mess and injured all year, so he doesn't really apply. But the thing with Loaisiga getting hurt, Green running into a brick wall, some of these, even Wandy to an extent, like it's a product of the lineup underperforming all season. And that's why you talk about rest and stuff. Like we can't have Luke Voit sit on the bench for more than half of the games. I know he's in the lineup tonight, but he needs to be in the lineup, as many times as possible going forward for the remainder of the season. They have a lot of problems, and this isn't breaking news. They have a lot of problems scoring runs. And so when you have that issue, like you need to have your best players in the lineup every night. And when you have, a lot of the team who's underperforming this year, DJ LeMahieu, Gleyber Torres, Gio Urshela, Joey Gallo obviously has not been good. When you have, almost half or more of your lineup really having bad seasons or struggling, when you have a guy like Voit who was going hot, like you just got to leave him in the lineup. And even if he struggles, you got to keep him in there. He's not a guy who, has deserved to be benched over some of the other players that have continued to get playing time. And that's not to dump on Brett Gardner or anything like that. But, I think we need to put our best hitters out there as much as we possibly can. The bullpen is dead. So there's no more saving the bullpen. The best thing that they can do is try to win games by 5 runs, 6 runs if they can, but they don't. And so that's the issue. Like we had trusted relievers. We had one guy who we really trusted who got hurt because he was used so much in high leverage situations. And Chad Green was very good at the beginning of the season, but he's been worked very, very, very heavily. He's, going to throw more innings and more games this year than he ever has in his career. And that's coming off of a shortened season. So like, it's not a sustainable model, which is something that we've been saying forever because they've always been a bullpen dominant team. Usually it's because the starting pitching is weak, but honestly, this season, the reason why the Yankees are even in a position to possibly make the playoffs is because the starting rotation has held the team together. The starting rotation has been very good all season. And now even that has taken hits.
Yeah.
So, this is all a product of these underperforming offensive players. It's DJ LeMahieu and it's Gleyber Torres mostly who are shouldering the blame, in my opinion, for the position that the team is in. Because I said this to you guys before, despite all of the struggles of this offense and this manager and some of these pitchers, this team right now would have a playoff spot if the bullpen didn't blow some of those games that they have this year. And I truly personally believe that if the lineup had scored more runs, if DJ LeMahieu had been having a better season, if Gleyber Torres had performed the way we hoped he would perform, those issues could still exist and this team would still be a playoff team, like for sure a lock playoff team. And right now it's 50-50. Like, are they going to make it or are they not going to make it? So it's just like everything goes back to the problems that we were complaining about at the beginning of the season that never really got back on track. Even with the Rizzo and Gallo trades, it never really clicked for any lengthy amount of time.
Outside of 13 straight games.
Yeah. And that was a 2-week blip. It was a 2-week blip.
And even that though, like
it was Judge and Stan.
It was Judge and Stan, but they weren't like blowing teams out. They were run game every night.
They don't blow teams out. I mean, I'm reading a stat right now from Mike Axissa on his Patreon that the Yankees, 39% of the batters their pitchers have faced this season have been low leverage situations. The MLB average is 45%. So they are like so far away from the norm in terms of like reliever workload and strenuous innings and strenuous pitches that put a lot more pressure on these pitchers' bodies and arms. And so, yeah, they don't play blowouts. Even during the streak, they didn't play blowouts. They were escaping jams, and Chapman was, saving games by the skin of his teeth. But the offense never clicked. And this goes back to the losing streak that they just came off of. If Judge and Stanton don't hit, they don't win because nobody else exists right now. Yep. And so it's all relating to that.
No, continue.
Well, I was just going to say that we will take it with a grain of, or not with a grain of salt, but you take what you can have. And it was nice, at least for once, to see Judge and Stanton be able to single-handedly will this team. We've spent so much time on this podcast dissecting, these two guys have never really been able to put it together at the same time. For those 13 games, they put it together at the same time. They literally carried the Yankees on their back. And that's what's almost so frustrating is the fact that after we saw how gargantuan a Yankees team can be, if these two guys are able to click on the same time, they just started to get away from that and to start to rest Stanton and to rest Judge and to take protection out of the lineup. And that's what has made it such a indictment on Cashman and Boone and the front office and the analytics staff and the people putting together these lineups. The fact that like literally what you went and did in 2017 during the offseason to get Stanton to come here, to say these are going to be your bash boys, to be able to make these two guys the center point of your team, it paid off for these 13 games. And you saw it firsthand. And then they were like, nah, we're good. We're going to, rest some guys some more.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You're just mentioning that Aaron Judge and Stan are having these great years, and we're fighting for a freaking wild card because of all these other issues. And the main concerns going into this year, right, was the health and the starting rotation. And so far, other than the last few weeks, of course, with some bullpen and starting pitching, and there were some starting position injuries early on, but nothing crazy. Everything's been fine. And Josh, you mentioned too, the starting rotation. But it's been coming down to, again, the offense and other people not doing the job. It's just like, did we really think DJ LeMahieu was going to have this bad of a year? No. Seeing how consistent he has been, and when they show those stats of where he was the last couple years with the Yankees and where he is league-wide now, it's just crazy to see. And Gleyber Torres, man, like I in chatting with you guys, like I've been probably the biggest supporter for Gleyber Torres, like the defender for him. Just like, no, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. But like the last week I've broken too. Like, and the Yankees finally see it. It's taken a while, but they finally moved him away from the shortstop position where hopefully this clears his mind a little bit and can get him going better offensively. I know he had a home run against the Mets this past weekend where he finally elevated the ball. I don't remember the last time that I saw Gleyber Torres get a home run like that.
It's supremely frustrating.
It's just, because Gleyber Torres, we all this potential and stuff. And yes, he's still young. So hopefully moving him back to second base for these they're doing a lot of shifting here, guys. It's kind of, I wouldn't say, I don't know would you say panic moves or they're just trying to see what works here? I don't changes or it's not panic. It's like, it's not working. So we got to switch something up.
Yeah. Well,
trying to be urgent. Urgency is there now, I guess.
Exactly. Well, it's what we were kind of like begging for in the beginning of the season when things were going so badly. And we were just saying like, they have to change something because the way it's going right now, what they're doing, it just doesn't work. And so like, it's not panic, but it feels maybe a little desperate because they are going to be weaker at defense at third and second, but better at shortstop. And obviously I think shortstop, the defense there, is very important. So I think the Yankees are willing to take those two downgrades at the other positions just so that they're a little bit more sure up the middle at short. But I just, and I don't have an issue with it. I just think that the Yankees, they were trying to trade for Trevor Story at the deadline. So they were admitting to themselves that the Gleyber shortstop thing was a failing experiment.
Even
And now,
Cashman said something. Remember earlier in the year?
And now here we are, September 14th. I mean, it started yesterday, September 13th. Now is when they decide to finally pull the plug. So it's just like, I appreciate that they're doing it and that there's sense of urgency there. And, it's one final card that Aaron Boone has to play. But why now? Like, why did it take so long? Because the Yankee fans have been saying for months and maybe even years that Gleyber Torres wasn't, a shortstop. It's not a viable long-term solution for them. But so it's just frustrating to see them make a move of this magnitude this late.
For me, I think it just goes to show you just how supremely dug into their own ideology the front office is. I mean, look, it took to the trade deadline for them to admit that they needed left-handed bats, and then they went out there and they got Rizzo and they got Joey Gallo, and lo and behold, it started to pay off a little bit when they were able to get some lefty power into that side of the lineup. They were able to balance the lineup a little bit, and sure, Gallo hasn't been that great. In fact, he's been downright awful since he's gotten here, but at least they have that in the lineup. This is just another example of that. Back in April and back in May and back in June, when they needed to switch something up, and when we got on this podcast and we screamed and yelled and we were begging them to do something because of how bad you have been, internally, the Yankees front office must have just said to themselves, we have time. We don't need to change our approach or go out there and fix what we want to do because the fan base wants it, because we believe what we're doing is right. Now, on September 14th, with 18 or so games left, you can't do that anymore. They are physically and metaphorically and, whatever Lee you want to put out there, out of time. If they lose more games, they will be out of the playoffs. So because of that, there is no other choice for them than to make these moves. Because, quite frankly, Gleyber Torres is terrible at shortstop. I don't care what number you throw at me. I don't care what analytics you throw at me. He literally made multiple errors this weekend that cost them runs. He's terrible at shortstop. And he cannot play shortstop in the future. So in the offseason, we'll get to the point where we have a discussion about whether or not the Yankees keep him here, they move on with him, they move him to second, whatever it is. That's a discussion for another day. But right now they're out of options. So in order to at least jumpstart something, they've almost said to themselves, like, we are out of time, we are out of games, we are past the point where we can pretend like our way works anymore, which we've been doing all year. And now let's move this guy back to second base. But they're at a disadvantage because they are so ill-prepared in their roster and ill-prepared in their makeup and depth that they have to play a third baseman at shortstop. They have to play a second baseman at third base, and they have to play a second baseman who was shortstop all year at second base again.
Yeah, I mean, like it all goes back to that, what you said about them being dug in, and it's the same thing with the Heaney situation. Like, okay, listen, Andrew Heaney obviously should not be on this team, right? He should have been designated for assignment many times over by now. He's almost, given up a run-in inning as a Yankee. It's bad, okay? Very, very bad. But they keep him on the roster because they don't like to lose bodies. They value more. It seems to me that they value, having bodies more than having the right bodies. Like, having Heaney on the roster while you keep Luis Gil in AAA is more important than losing Andrew Heaney and having Gil in the majors, which is basically the decision that they made, in August, at the end of August, beginning of this month. And I think most people would disagree, but whatever. Then they moved Heaney to the bullpen just because it got so bad as a starter that they pretty much had no choice. So the point is, like, he shouldn't be on the roster, but the Yankees believe that he should be because it's a body that they don't want to lose. Now, he's going to be on the roster. That does not mean he needs to pitch in high leverage situations. That's an Aaron Boone problem, right? That is another thing of, like, well, our way is the right way. Like, let's just allow this guy to sit in the bullpen and allow our manager to put him in high leverage situations, which he's continued to do. But the point is, like, the front office, it's the game winning the game feels less important to them than their like stupid roster manipulation and decisions like that. That's what they seem to care the most about. Like, oh, well, it's a 28-man roster, but if we keep Luis Heel in AAA and have Andrew Heaney in our bullpen, and we can call up Heel when we want to, it's kind of like having a 29-man roster. But you're losing yourselves games when you do that, because Heaney is on the roster, which means he's going to get in games, because this bullpen is very taxed and they don't have the luxury. On a normal team, they would, but this team doesn't have the luxury of hiding guys in the back of the bullpen for mop-up duty. There are no games with mop-up duty. They don't win blowouts. They don't lose blowouts. So if Heaney's in the pen, he's pitching. And it's decisions like that lose you games. And it's the same thing with the rest. And it's the same thing with, gluing Giancarlo Stanton to the DH spot for half of the season. Like, it's these decisions of,
when he's been great since playing outfield.
Our computers say this, and so that means it has to work. And if it doesn't work, well, then we just chalk it up to an error and the computer will correct for it the next time. But the game is played on the field. It's the same thing that we've been saying all year. It has a heartbeat. Like, these are people. They're not just machines on a Excel spreadsheet. Like, it's more than just about the manipulation of your roster and the manipulation of your lineup. You have to win the games. And it seems that is secondary to them. And obviously that's probably not the case, but that's just how it plays to the fans.
I mean, how many times in fantasy football have we literally seen these projections for these players, and then somebody comes out and has a 40-point game on a weekend?
Exactly.
But it's like, you still set your roster, you still set your lineups based off of what the projections are for these people. And then sometimes you leave a guy on your bench who has a 40-point game, and sometimes you have a guy on your roster who has a 2-point game. And if dummies like that, who rely on interfaces to play make-believe football, can understand that, the game gets played on the field, you would think the guys who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, because the Yankees definitely pay their analytics staff well, would understand that that's the way that it works. But to your point, Josh, what's the old expression? We would rather say we're right and lose than, admit we're wrong and win. That's what they want. They never want to admit they're wrong until the last possible moment, where then they just look like idiots because they have to admit they're wrong and they don't have the pieces to correct it.
Yeah. So it's like they can say at the end of the season, well, it didn't work out for us this time, but next time, we'll have our algorithms finely tuned a little bit more, and it'll play for us in our favor.
Or Loizaga won't get hurt, or they wouldn't have lost to Garrett Cole 3 innings into a game with a hamstring, something, or blah 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 blah.
Yep. What computer and algorithm has Andrew Heaney on a team though? Like, what? That's just I don't get. I understand if winning is secondary, then why we play?
Well, you know what?
We need to win games to make the playoffs. And
Josh was right when he said roster manipulation. That's what it is. It's the
I get that, but it makes no sense to have. I don't care about roster manipulation.
None of us.
They have to pay him. They don't want to cut him. They have to pay him money.
None of us care about that.
Then they don't. Then it's just idiotic, because Andrew Heaney knows he sucks. You can see it on the face when he pitches. He's not good. He shouldn't even be in the league. He can't give up home runs to little league guys. He's actually had a good couple games. But anyway, give me a break, man.
They don't.
Every time I see his face, I want to punch the TV.
But look at the
I'd most hated of my list.
Look at the other players that are like, I guess, like below him on the totem pole, like Brooks Kriske, who just got designated for assignment today, like you mentioned before, Jules. Nick Nelson, Sal Romano, who has been back and forth a million times. Like, they don't have the arms. And I'm not saying that we obviously know that Heaney isn't good, but he's been in the major leagues.
I was reading Adam Warren's down there. He's done it before.
Well, that's the thing too. It's like they asked him.
In a roster, you got to get rid of.
He's not on the 40-man, so they would have.
Are you trying to win or not, though?
But that's what we're saying. That's what we're saying. It's like they value the bodies. Like, okay, so in our organization, we have these guys, and we can only have some of them on our major league roster because of a 40-man roster and roster number limitations. But if we have these guys in our organization, we're winning because we have them. But if you don't use them or you have the wrong guys in the wrong places, what does it matter?
And also, let's not forget the fact that the Yankees literally make roster decisions based off of financials. I mean, that cannot be buried, because the fact is, at the trade deadline, the Yankees took on 2 big-time contracts with Gallo and with Rizzo that were free.
Mm-hmm.
Wonder whether or not, if the Cubs or the Rangers were not really willing to eat all that salary this year, how into the fact of trading for these 2 players the Yankees would have been. I'm sure, maybe not a big amount, but I'm sure the fact that Heaney was not for free. He was a $2 million contract player coming in this year, which means they have to pay him a couple $100,000. I'm sure that not DFAing him or DFAing him and admitting your mistake probably has a little bit of financial incentive for them. If they don't have to pay for a guy who's not on their roster anymore, in the way that Texas is doing with Rougned Odor, who, of course, was another free player that the Yankees have, then the Yankees wouldn't do it. They don't want somebody else to pick up Andrew Heaney, even if he stinks, because he will get picked up. He's an arm on a body somewhere. Some major league team will use him. The Yankees don't want to pay him, even if that's $100K. They don't want to have to put that money towards him. So they'd rather him bomb this season because they need arms, even if they're not good, because they're paying him.
Yeah, and
that's the arrogance of the Yankees that we.
That's it. I was just going to say the same.
The arrogance of the Yankees is what got us here, and what's not going to get us to where we want to be, and that's winning number 28. Because as long as this, as you're probably going to say, Jess, as long as that's this organization's philosophy, then we ain't going nowhere.
Mm-hmm. Because you can't. I get the financials coming into play for big name players, obviously, like Jacoby Ellsbury. The reason why he wasn't, he was around and on the roster for so long was because he was making so much money. But when we're talking about the fringes of the roster, like the Andrew Heaneys of the world, and the financials are going to come into play for a guy who's making a couple $1,000,000, who you don't even have to pay the full amount to because the season's almost over. That's what, incentivizes you to keep a guy around, while the Blue Jays designate Brad Hand for assignment, who's a pitcher with a much better pedigree, who I don't know the salary, but he was making more than Heaney, right? So if the Blue Jays can do something like that after acquiring him at the deadline, then the Yankees have no reason to be, pussyfooting around the Heaney stuff. It's the arrogance. Like that's what it is. Like if winning isn't the number one thing, then you're obviously not going to win, because your judgment as an organization and as, a front office is going to be clouded by things that get in the way of that. And so that's sort of like where we are now. And like, it sort of sounds like we're blaming the season, like whatever happens, on Andrew Heaney, which isn't the case, but he's just an example. He's an example of the problem. He's like a symptom of a larger sickness.
The issue with Heaney is the same issue that just kind of boils down to it, because the fact is, right now on Tuesday, September 14th, if the New York Yankees made the wild card game, you would not be able to tell me with any conviction that they were going to win that game, let alone win the American League Division Series and then go to the Championship Series or make the World Series. And it's not because we're pessimistic fans. And it's not because we don't have faith in the team. And it's not because anything can or cannot happen. It's because the Yankees legitimately are keeping on players who are a detriment to the team. They are right now in a position in which offensively, defensively, bullpen-wise, and starting rotation-wise, they have too many negatives that make it impossible for them to get a positive. And that is what will ultimately come back to burn them, because they are not even in the playoffs yet. So truly, they don't have the same luxuries that a team like the Blue Jays or a team like Boston or a team that's really up there like the Dodgers do to be able to do something. The roster is not built for October right now. It's barely built to win a wild card game.
Yeah, I
themselves to blame.
They're not even built for the way it is right now in the bullpen. They're not built for a pennant race. Forget playoff games. They're not built for what they're doing right now. And if it comes down to the fact that they actually do end up making it, it's like a miracle almost.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that is there, I mean, on paper, is the lineup. We have today's our first, other than Gary, today's our first like look at the lineup where all the A guys are in there on paper. I'm saying because yes, everyone has underperformed and stuff, and of course tonight we're versing a guy who I think has a 7 ERA in Camden Yards. So, like we've said earlier in the podcast, this offense is really going to have to step up and score some runs. So, our bullpen can get relaxed and calm down because it's so taxed. They have a record here. Records for Yankees and blowouts, 5 runs or more. They're 15-14. The Red Sox are 20-19. The Blue Jays are 27-12. The Rays are 34-13, and the Orioles are 13-38. We only have 2 more wins better than the Orioles when it comes to blowouts. And those 3 other teams, especially the Blue Jays and Rays, they're killing teams, and that's why they are. The Blue Jays are only a 1 game in front.
The Blue Jays put up a 20
run differential.
So
yeah, if you look at the Blue Jays run differential, man, they are just. Look at that lineup; they're just crushing us.
How many times have the Yankees cracked 10 runs this year?
That's a good question.
Off the top of my head,
that's a good question for Katie Sharp.
5 times. I don't even think. I think that
I'm going to do some digging. Yeah,
to me, that is a very, very generous number. 5 times of having scored double-digit runs this year. Meanwhile, Toronto has done it a plethora of times. I couldn't even fathom the Yankees. Yeah, Toronto scored 10 runs in an inning. I can't fathom the Yankees doing it in a game, let alone touching the number 20 with this current 2021 Yankees team. And Toronto just did it literally on
Last
Football
week.
Sunday.
Yeah. Oh, this Sunday, 22-7, right?
Yep.
Something like that.
It's like a football score.
Yeah.
The Blue Jays could score. Well, this is what's going to.
And it was against Baltimore, who you should blow up, but the Yankees barely have a winning record against this year.
And they keep it close as well, all the time, every game.
That record alone is an indictment on everybody in the organization, because those are the games that literally, forget any other bad loss the Yankees have had this year. Forget the Pete Alonso home run against Chapman. Forget blowing the lead against the Angels. Forget the Field of Dreams game. Forget them not sweeping or even getting a win against Detroit. The terrible losses are the ones against Baltimore. A team 50 games under 500, and they lost 2 out of 3 to them less than a week and a half ago.
Remember, they got swept by the Tigers?
Yep. Those are the ones that are like, the Rays literally lost 1 game to them this year. That's the division. If the Yankees were 7 games better against Baltimore, which is not unheard of. This team is terrible. So 7 games better, which is not asking a lot. They probably are comfortably in the wild card lead right now. And who knows? Maybe they're challenging for the division, or at the very least, there's a possibility that maybe could have a chance to compete for it in the final 9 games of the season.
Yeah. So I just looked up the double-digit runs this year scored by the Yankees. So they've scored double digits 6 times.
So 1 more than 5.
Yeah, and 9 runs 2 more times. So, and I'm just looking now just to see. Those games were mostly all blowouts, except for one of the 9-run games was 9-6 win against the Twins.
Okay.
But yeah, so those are the games. Obviously, makes sense when they score double-digit runs, you win blowouts. But other than that, there aren't too many more games that are decided by 5 or more runs. And even those those games are a little bit low scoring. So who knows? It could have been some stuff late in the game, where the Yankees have like a little bit of a bigger inning in the 8th after somebody just pitched a hard 7th inning, stuff like that. So that stuff just kind of piles on top. But the point is that, all season, and this is a lineup in theory and we've
Judge,
seen it.
Voit, now they have Gallo, they have Rizzo.
Yeah, we've seen it in past years. They've scored runs like it was nobody's business, like it was their job, which it is, but they were like the number 1 run scoring team in baseball for multiple years at a time, and now all of a sudden it's dead. It's just shocking to see this stuff.
It's like
to have that many big names in this lineup and to have only scored 10 runs 6 times in 162 games, which means that in theory they could end the entire season having less than 10 times, in that long of a year is terrible. It's awful.
Yeah.
There's no other way around it. With the names in that lineup, MVP, AL Rookie of the Year, and should have been MVP, guy who was MVP candidate last year, in theory, one of the better young players in the game, the home run champ from last season, two great left-handed power hitters, and less than 7 times they've scored 10 runs.
It's just very confusing, man. And yeah, before the deadline, we read some articles where it was like they were 2 right-handed and they were a very pitchable lineup, right? And then we got these 2 lefties, and yeah, we got on that 13-game winning streak, but now it's back to the same old shit. And it's like, I've never seen a team. I think I tweeted this a couple of weeks ago. I just never, and I've probably mentioned it plenty of times because it's the same damn thing. I've never seen a team where, such a talented, loaded team on paper, like you said, just great players just do so poorly against rookie pitchers or these pitchers with like 5 ERAs that are either have had 8-game stretches coming into that game where they've been brutal and then they 2-hit shut out the Yanks, or if it's just, it's just very puzzling. And it's just like, just baseball. It's just like, it's just for the Yankees. It just happens, or is there something else there? It's just very, very weird. But yeah, the Yankees
I'm just
going to have to shut up and talk now. They're going to have to hit.
Yeah, I'm just looking now just to compare, just to see. Toronto, double-digit scoring outputs 21 times this year. Jesus. And they scored 9 runs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So
almost triple what the Yankees have, or quadruple at a certain point.
Yep. So that's just a comparison of one team. I'm going to assume that that's a higher end of the league and not closer to the average, but still, this is a team that they're directly competing with, who they were supposed to be a lot better than, because Toronto was supposed to be what, a 3rd place team, a 4th place team, where the Yankees are right now, basically. So, it's just by comparison, it just shows you, and it's nothing new. Again, it's just more stats to confirm what we've been saying all along, which is the offense isn't good enough. And there's just other stuff too that you want to just pull your hair out about. And, a lot of that has to do, at least for me, with the manager. And, I don't know if we're going to get into it now, but the Sal Romano stuff last week, what the hell was that? In that game where he comes in the 7th inning of a tie game with Wandy Peralta warming up behind him. Why are we starting? I just don't understand. And then he gets designated for assignment the following day. And they bring him back today. It's just, that's the stuff that when you manage your roster weirdly, and then you have a bad manager to compound the mistakes, it's a terrible combination. It's a recipe that you can't overcome. And, it's just stuff like that constantly happens. And you honestly have to hold your breath. Anytime Boone has to make a choice like that.
That's another big issue. Say they make it into October, and not only do we have the lineup problems, can we hit and hold the lead, it's can this stupid ass manager make the right decision at the right time? These are 3,
and he's given us no reason to think he can.
No, all 3.
And that's not just
not giving us any
reason.
reason.
That's literally been the playoffs the last 3 years.
Yeah.
It's a very puzzling issue, because the fact is, as Yankee fans, we want to see the Yankees not only make the playoffs, but win the World Series. But at the same time, we're now pressed with the question of, if the only way the Yankees might get change is by them stinking, then what does that mean as far as the team is concerned? Because the fact is, Aaron Boone is not only a mediocre manager, he's a terrible manager. And he has been as bad of a reason why they have stunk this year as the players, the pitchers, the bullpen, Cashman, the analytics staff, whatever it is that you want to say. He's pretty much reason either 1A or 1B about why they have been as bad as they have been. And it can be conflicting, especially when you consider that them making the playoffs and going on a run short of them winning the World Series might mean that he's probably going to get another chance next year. And it would be hard to justify him being able to get one. But the way that the Yankees are, Boone is their quote unquote guy because he's a mouthpiece, and he allows Cashman and analytics to do what they want, which is what they've pretty much done through the last 3/4 plus of this year.
I mean, it's that's what we've been saying to ourselves, the last few days is even if they make the wild card game and they lose, we all think that there's a chance that he'll come back, like almost as likely that he'll be back as he won't. And that's because we think that the Yankees organization, that is, views just making the playoffs as enough. And the playoffs are a crapshoot. So if we get there, that means we did our jobs the right way. And if we win, that's great. And if we don't, well, there's a reason why we didn't win, but it wasn't really something that was necessarily our fault, even though it's a tough business. Like, things are your fault. It's hard. It's not easy to win championships and to make the World Series. But ultimately, if you fall short, that's because something that you did in your roster makeup wasn't right, or in your managerial moves wasn't right. And
if they make it, then what they'll say is, we'll tweak the simulation next year, and we probably won't play in the wild card game because we have a lot of talent offensively, and we have a lot of good starters coming back next year, and blah 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 blah. The same lip service we've literally heard year in and year out for the last 2.5, 3 years.
I'm kind of leaning both ways here because, like you guys are saying, like that we've seen it the last few years where the Yankees just make excuses, and I don't trust them in making the right decision. But like, if you don't make the playoffs, that's a catastrophe, right? Like, we would hope Aaron Boone's gone. Now, if you make the wild card game and you lose there, you make the ALDS and you lose there, that's still a disappointment. This season is still a disappointment. The Yankees were supposed to run away with the American League East and be a World Series contender. If they sneak into the wild card game because they get lucky with some other teams losing down the stretch, or they just like back into it like they did back in 2015 and they lose, I would hope that the Yankees organization is still seeing that, okay, something happened here and we lost again, and this is still the most underwhelming season. Like, it's still a disappointment. So I'm having a little faith, but like you said, guys, like the Yankees are used to making excuses. So I'm holding a little faith there, but yeah.
Wishful thinking at this point. All right, right. Give us Papa of the Week, baby.
Papa of the Week has to go to Aaron Judge, man, because he's the only one trying to save this season, even though I don't know what the hell he said last week in that speech, because the next day out, it was the most embarrassing game ever against the Mets. I think the Mets scored like 10 runs in like 2 innings, but then Aaron Judge backed it up the next 3-4
By the way, for the record, I resent what you said because Stanton has also been playing super good, and
he has, but Aaron Judge.
No, well, you said Judge was the only guy trying to save the season, So
I meant like recently, but Stan has. Hey, he tried Sunday.
Stanton hit a home run against the Mets. It was a tying run, or else they would have gotten blown out in the game. But
you're right.
Just for the record, so we'll let call a spade, my friend.
All right, relax. I love my Stanton now.
He's a little sensitive. Jules is a little sensitive.
He is when it comes to Stan. No, he's sensitive because every time Stan has his big moment,
yeah,
he gets buried, which is the truth. And
true.
I'm not going to go on a rant there, but all I'm going to say is his 2 biggest moments of the year with the Lindor homer and him puffing his chest out and being able to do that, and his go-ahead home run in the Field of Dreams. The Yankees jobbed him like he was a low-card WWE wrestler.
Wow.
And, I'm pissed about it. And that's why he'll never be a true Yankee, because Mark fans, not you guys, but idiot Mark fans say Stanton never does anything big because they don't watch every single game and they just see the fucking box score where they lose. And I'm going on a rant now, so I'm slowing my roll.
Hey, E-Ray, you said something interesting in your Papa of the Week, and I'm not going to steal your thunder this week and give my own Papa. I will just confirm something that you said. You mentioned team meeting, right? So in the same article that I was referencing before that Exissa wrote with the stat about the leverage situations for the relievers, he actually listed, coincidentally, the team meetings that they've had this year, at least the ones that have been, talked about in the media. April 16th, they had a team meeting after an 8-2 loss to Tampa. They lost the next 2 games. June 29th, they had a team meeting before an 11-5 win over the Angels. They then lost the next 3 games. September 9th, last week, team meeting after the 4-game sweep by the Blue Jays. The next night was their most embarrassing loss of the season, where Gary Sanchez decided that he wanted to be a matador instead of a catcher. They, lost obviously the next that next game. And then following night, they had a meeting on September 10th after the ugly loss to the Mets. And then the Yankees won the next game, obviously, before losing the final game of the series on Sunday. So there you go. The team meetings have not worked for the Yankees.
Maybe they should stop talking.
Yeah.
I mean, we knew that.
We've said that before.
Aaron Judge, or whether it's a Luke Voigt, or really anybody, when they try and be cute, they usually, we've seen it so many times this year, whether it was the jacket, whether it was New York back in 2018, whether it was Voigt saying they were going to go out there and win last year versus the Rays. They're idiots, and they do need to stop.
We didn't even talk about Sunday's thing, which we don't have to, but it's more of the same nonsense.
Long story short, the Mets are babies, and whistling is not the same as putting cameras in center field. That's the only thing that we're going to say about that. If anything more comes of it, it'll be an interesting topic of fodder for us to bring up, because who knows? In 3 weeks when we're doing the pod, it'll probably be a season recap pod, but maybe we'll get lucky. But who knows?
Definitely, I'm banking on season recap.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Real quick, let me just mention that I don't know if I'm the one that hacks the Yankees, but my boss texted me 3 weeks ago saying, "Hey, I got Knicks preseason tickets on October 5th," and I was like, "Nah, I can't make it. Yanks are probably going to be in the wild card game. I think they won."
There it is. Yeah.
There it is. I was the guy.
I had also been contemplating, how I'm going to drive up from DC to be able to watch the wild card game with you guys. But as of right now, it looks like A, they're probably not going to make the wild card game. And B, if they do, it's definitely not going to be at Yankee Stadium.
Probably not.
Neither of those things are really relevant anymore.
So E-Ray will be at the Knicks preseason game. I'll be watching the Knicks preseason game, and Jules will be down in DC.
No, I still don't think I'm going, but we'll see.
So there you go. Always exciting and always fun, but we'll get you an update on whether or not E-Ray does go to that preseason game. And it will be based off of whether or not the Yankees make the playoffs, which only time will tell at this point. That's going to do it for us here inside our little Yankees podcast. As always, you can listen to us wherever podcasts are found. Now that we're back and good as new, make sure you check us out on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. We're on TuneIn. We're on SoundCloud. We also broadcast every episode live on YouTube. Go to our page at Our Little Yankees Podcast. Make sure you give us a rating and hit subscribe as well, so that way you can be up to date with all our latest episodes and you can listen back. For Josh Levin and E-Ray Sepulveda, I'm Julian Coltree. Go Yankees.